So I'm delighted to turn to our keynote speaker, Larry Diamond. Larry is the Mosbacher Senior Fellow of Global Democracy at the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies. He's a Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and a Professor by courtesy of Sociology and Political Science. Professor Diamond's research focuses on the state of democracy around the world and on policies and reforms to defend and advance democracy. His latest book is called Ill Winds: Saving Democracy from Russian Rage, Chinese Ambition, and American Complacency. And it analyzes the challenges confronting liberal democracy in the United States and around the world and offers an agenda for strengthening and defending democracy at home and abroad. Professor Diamond is a leader in many ways, as a scholar and a consultant, and I'm not going to go through all the many positions that he's held, just to say that we're super proud to have him here. And most importantly, he received his BA, his MA, and his PhD, all from Stanford University. So we're delighted to have Professor Diamond here for the 2025 Our Diplomacy Keynote Address.
Thank you so much, Ken. And before I build on the eloquent remarks you've just heard, and maybe destroy the microphone in the process, I want to thank Ken Schultz for his years of distinguished service as the faculty director of the International Relations Program and congratulate him on winning the university's highest teaching award, which you just heard, the Walter J. Gores Award. So I want to begin by congratulating our graduates, the remarkable class of 2025. You made the transition from high school to Stanford after the chaos of a pandemic. Your 4 years here were marked by thrilling advances in technology and the life sciences and disheartening divisions in politics and social life. You now exit into a world in which you well know faces existential challenges of climate change, species extinction, weapons proliferation, and artificial intelligence rapidly disrupting every aspect of life, if not life itself. If you were raised in the United States, you may now feel that you can no longer take for granted the personal freedoms and constitutional democracy that once seemed like the air we breathe. Sometimes a bit smoky, but mostly just there. If you have come from abroad, perhaps you have watched while democracy in your country has slipped back or been lost in the global recession of freedom over the last 2 decades. Or you may have come from a country in which people have not been free to speak, protest, and vote. Maybe one of the things that attracted you to Stanford and to the United States is that here, as the Stanford motto says, the winds of freedom blow. And now you may wonder, how long will that be true? There is no denying that we are at a global turning point. And as you leave Stanford, each of you are at a turning point as well. For the past 4 years, you've looked to us, the faculty and staff of this great university, to offer instruction, guidance, support, and I hope at times inspiration. In the years to come, and they are coming very fast, we will look to you to provide the new knowledge, the moral compass, the policy directions, and the civic engagement to meet the awesome challenges before us. A generation ago, the future stretched forward at a more measured pace. Now, as Martin Luther King said in his 1963 I Have a Dream speech, we are faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. I think you heard Katie Ledecky refer to this. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action." End quote. There are many ways in which you might feel the fierce urgency of now. I want to take the rest of my remarks to speak about the realm that reflects the major you chose, international relations. Let me begin with a story about the Hoover Tower. Bert will like this. This giant building in whose shadow we sit right now. Herbert Hoover was in the first graduating class of Stanford University, the class of 1895. He became a global mining magnate and then a public figure, overseeing and negotiating massive shipments of food to a devastated Europe during and after World War I. His experience in establishing one of the first large-scale international humanitarian relief operations in U.S. history not only launched his political career in the U.S., it also left a deep imprint on him personally. He brought back from Europe troves of files, pamphlets, newspapers, government documents, which would become the Hoover Collection on War, Revolution, and Peace, and later the research institution of the same name. All these masses of documents needed a place to be stored, and so the tower was commissioned largely for this purpose. That is why most of the tower's floors have no offices and no windows, as you probably noticed. Hoover went on to become Commerce Secretary and then President. The Depression hit, and he could not overcome it. His presidency was not successful. But he remained an internationalist. He retained a deep commitment to collecting documents that would help us understand the world and record its history. After his presidency, he remained devoted to the core principles of peace and economic and political freedom. These ideas are inscribed on the wall of the Hoover Tower Rotunda, with appreciation to the donors who made the construction of that awesome tower possible. The tower was completed, please note the date, in June of 1941. 6 months later, the United States was drawn back into a Second World War that devoured global peace and threatened to extinguish freedom. When I go to my office in the Hoover Tower, I walk past the inscribed words on that wall, and often I wonder, what must these donors have been thinking as they dedicated this tower 6 months before America's entry into the largest, most calamitous and transformational war in global history? They probably could not imagine it then, certainly not the scale of it, but they were at the edge of a hinge in history that would claim over 400,000 American lives and completely reshape America's role in the world. The Allied victory in World War II and the institution building that followed reordered international relations and brought the most dramatic strides for peace, freedom, economic development, and human well-being in history. Colonial rule came to an end, and large swaths of humanity were liberated to determine their own national futures. Billions of people were lifted out of poverty and into middle-class lives or previously unimaginable affluence. Diseases like smallpox and polio were eradicated, or nearly so. Authoritarian regimes still threaten peace. Famine, civil war, and terrorism still traumatize nations, but dozens of countries displaced dictatorships and made transitions to democracy, and the number of deaths from war declined dramatically. By and large, the last 80 years have been the freest, most stable, and prosperous in human history. Why has this been the case? The answer, I believe, is the liberal international order that was constructed from the ashes of World War II. Visionary policymakers in the US, Europe, and other allied and independent nations created the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and numerous other institutions to manage conflicts, secure borders, deter aggression, prevent trade wars, and control the proliferation of dangerous arms. We went from a world, as described by Thucydides, in which the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, to a world in which the strong were restrained from temptation and the weak were at least somewhat protected by a rules-based order. Alongside these international institutions came new American initiatives to strengthen our engagement with the world. the U.S. Agency for International Development, the U.S. Information Agency, the Voice of America, the Peace Corps, the U.S. Institute of Peace, the National Endowment for Democracy, the Millennium Challenge Corporation. For the past decade or so, this liberal international order has been fraying. A tragic step along this descent was the first Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, in which the Russian dictator, Vladimir Putin, seized control over Crimea and part of the Donbass region. Now, since February of 2022, Ukraine, with not even a third of the population of Russia, has been fighting for its very existence in one of the most ruthless and senseless wars of the post-World War II era. There are not two equally worthy sides to this story. The Russian dictatorship is shredding the norms and challenging the institutions that have kept the peace in Europe for 3 generations. This cannot stand. Meanwhile, China's communist authoritarian regime is posing an increasingly worrisome challenge to peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region, with its claims to sovereignty over virtually the entire South China Sea, its mounting intrusions upon the fisheries, natural resources, and coastal waters of other Asian nations, and its steadily increasing campaign to pressure, encroach upon, and wear down the people and government of Taiwan. Taiwan is not only a vibrant democracy, but a crucial piece of the security architecture that ensures a free and open Indo-Pacific region. It is also a world leader in technology, as some of us will find when we visit there shortly, producing the vast majority of the world's most sophisticated semiconductors. Any use of force by China to end this miracle would represent the most serious threat to global peace since World War II. But we are inching forward toward that perilous scenario. More than at any time in decades, U.S. partnership and leadership is vital to sustaining global peace, prosperity, and security. But these goals cannot be achieved by savaging the vision and institutions of the liberal international order in pursuit of the short-sighted agenda of America first. Consider foreign aid. The $50 to $70 billion that the U.S. has been spending annually on foreign aid is barely 1% of the federal budget, but it saves and extends lives, prevents famines, mitigates violent conflict, strengthens government, creates new markets for American goods and services, and generates political and moral capital that the United States can draw on to help steer the world away from poverty, chaos, pandemics, dictatorship, and war. The $882 million that the U.S. spent on global media last year was barely 1% of the federal budget. For the cost of 5 or 6 advanced fighter jets, we were able to provide independent news and information to people deprived of press freedom, and to counter the anti-democratic and anti-American propaganda of authoritarian regimes. Now all of this is being recklessly dismantled. You don't have to be an idealist to recognize why these modest investments are deeply in the American interest. The fastest growing economies and populations in the coming decades will be in the emerging market countries, especially in Africa. When we level the information playing field, promote democratic values, and partner with them to develop as open markets and rule of law states, we build the kind of world in which America thrives. On top of all this, we are now risking wrecking the most important foundation of American prosperity and global influence, our leadership in science and technology. The drastic cuts in research funding for universities and the proposed tax increases on their endowment earnings threaten to destroy American global competitiveness at a time when China is pulling ahead in scientific research productivity in an estimated 37 of 44 fields of advanced technology. Our ability to compete in scientific discovery, technological innovation, and the entrepreneurship that flows from them depends heavily on international students who comprise the majority of U.S. graduate enrollments in computer science, math, and many fields of engineering, and I strongly suspect not a trivial proportion of our graduates here today, Ken. In addition, higher education is one of our biggest export earners. International students pay tuition and fees in the U.S. that bring in $50 billion a year to reduce our trade deficit. And they start and run companies. Fareed Zakaria recently noted that 5 of America's top 10 companies are run by immigrants. But now the siren song of America First threatens to place America second, third, or fourth by slashing visas for international students and sending them away at precisely the moment they are most valuable, after they have completed their education. If you are an international student, I hope you will consider staying here in the U.S. and that your fellow students will work in the coming years for the policies to keep you here so that you can join in the continuing transformative pursuits of scientific, technological, economic, cultural, and democratic innovation. Wherever you come from or head to, I hope all of you in the class of 2025 will be in these crucial years to come and throughout your lives informed advocates for international cooperation and vigorous defenders of the institutions and funding we need to promote peace, improve health, enhance incomes, and defend the rights of people everywhere to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let me close with the words that inspired me to pursue a globally engaged career. 64 years later, John F. Kennedy's inaugural address speaks again to a new pivotal moment in the history of America and the world. And I now quote, "Now the trumpet summons us again to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation. A struggle against the common enemies of, I will say, humanity, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, North and South, East and West, that can assure a more fruitful life for all humanity? Will you join in that historic effort? In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from that responsibility," John F. Kennedy said. "I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world." Thank you.